Ambassador Kim Tae-ho stepped into the most impressive room he had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that sparkled like diamonds, stretching up so high he could barely see the ceiling. Hundreds of different alien creatures sat in curved rows, their strange voices mixing together in a noise that sounded like a busy marketplace. This was the Galactic Council, the group that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Their space station was enormous, bigger than any city on Earth. It floated near the center of the galaxy, where billions of stars created a light show that would have taken Tae-ho's breath away if he wasn't so nervous. The Korean diplomat adjusted his black suit and tried to look calm. He had trained for this moment for years, but nothing could have prepared him for actually being here. Around him, creatures that looked like they came from nightmares and dreams sat together. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales that changed colors. A few looked almost human, except for their bright purple skin or extra eyes. High Chancellor Morthak was the most frightening of them all. He belonged to a species called the Vorthans, and they had been in charge of the council for longer than human civilization had existed. Morthak was huge, at least 10 feet tall, with skin that looked like dark metal. His 6 eyes were arranged in 2 rows across his face, and they all focused on Tae-ho with the intensity of someone who had never been told no. Species designation. Human, Morthak said, his voice booming through the chamber. Every conversation stopped. Your tribute assessment has been calculated. Tae-ho felt his heart racing, but he kept his face neutral. This was it, the moment that would decide humanity's future. A holographic screen appeared in front of him, floating in the air like magic. The numbers that appeared made his stomach drop. 60% of Earth's resources. Everything. Their oil, their metals, their food, their water. More than half of everything humanity had ever built or discovered. But that wasn't the worst part. Complete technological databases. Every invention, every scientific discovery, every piece of knowledge that had taken humans thousands of years to learn. They wanted it all handed over like homework to a teacher, and then came the part that made Tae-ho's hands clench into fists behind his back. 100,000 humans, real people with families and dreams and lives. They wanted to take them away from Earth for 500 years, 5 centuries of slavery. This is standard procedure for all newcomer species, Morthak continued, and Tae-ho could hear the boredom in his voice. To this ancient creature, humanity was just another item on a very long list. Your primitive chemical propulsion suggests limited resistance capability. Compliance is expected within 30 solar cycles. The insult stung more than Tae-ho expected. Chemical propulsion. They thought humans were still using simple rockets like the ones that had first taken them to the moon. They had no idea what Earth's engineers had really been working on for the past 50 years. Other council members were already talking among themselves, their strange voices creating a buzz of excitement. Tae-ho caught pieces of their conversations through his translator earpiece. They were arguing about who would get which resources. The spider-like arachnids wanted Earth's metals. The gas-breathing nebuloids were interested in the oceans. Everyone had already decided that humanity would just give up without a fight. Tae-ho touched his collar, feeling the tiny recording device hidden there. Every word, every insult, every casual discussion of enslaving his people was being captured. Back on Earth, President Park Ji-woo and the military leaders would see exactly how these aliens talked about humans when they thought no one important was listening. I will relay your generous terms to my government, Tae-ho said, his voice steady and polite. The word generous almost stuck in his throat, but diplomacy required him to be respectful even when he wanted to scream. Some of the council members laughed at his response. Not the kind of laugh you hear when something is funny, but the cruel laugh of bullies who think they've already won. They had done this dance thousands of times before with thousands of different species. Some fought back and were destroyed. Others surrendered immediately and became servants forever. But all of them eventually knelt before the council's power. What they didn't know was that humans had been preparing for this day since the moment they first detected alien signals in space. While the council saw primitive chemical rockets, Earth's secret facilities had been building something very different. While they assumed humanity would be too scared to fight back, Human strategists had been planning for a war they hoped would never come, but knew was inevitable. As Tai-Ho bowed politely and prepared to leave, he allowed himself one small smile. These ancient aliens were about to learn something new about the youngest species in the galaxy. Humans didn't like being told what to do. President Park Ji-woo sat in a room that officially didn't exist. 500 feet below the busy streets of Seoul, behind blast doors thick enough to survive a nuclear war, Earth's most powerful leaders gathered around a table that would decide humanity's fate. The holographic recording of Ambassador Kim Tae-ho's meeting played for the third time. Every person in the room had memorized every word, every insult, every casual threat. The alien voices speaking about enslaving humans like they were discussing the weather made everyone's blood boil. General Lee Min-ho was the first to break the silence after the recording ended. He was a man who had spent his entire career preparing for wars that might never come. Now sitting in his crisp military uniform, he looked almost relieved that the waiting was finally over. "They expect us to roll over like every other species," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much conflict. "Their mistake." Around the table, the other leaders nodded. These weren't politicians giving speeches or generals playing war games. These were the people who had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment, even when the rest of the world thought they were paranoid. Dr. Choi Soo-jin looked nothing like what most people imagined when they thought of a weapons designer. She was small, wore thick glasses, and spoke so quietly that people often had to lean forward to hear her. But behind her gentle appearance was one of the most brilliant minds on Earth. For 20 years, she had been working on projects so secret that even their names were classified. She touched her tablet, and the room's holographic display came alive with images that would have seemed like science fiction just decades earlier. Ships that looked nothing like the crude rockets the aliens remembered. Weapons that could destroy targets from impossible distances. Communication systems that worked faster than light itself. "The Prometheus project is operational," she said, and for the first time in months she smiled. "Our quantum entanglement networks mean our ships can talk to each other instantly, no matter how far apart they are. Our kinetic platforms can fire projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Our AI coordination systems can control thousands of weapons at once with perfect accuracy." She paused and looked directly at President Park. "They think we're still using chemical rockets. They have no idea what we've actually built." Admiral Yoon Jae-sung had been quiet during the entire meeting, but now he leaned forward. He was the kind of officer who inspired confidence just by being in the room. His hair was gray from decades of service, and his hands showed scars from his time as a young pilot. "Our fleet is ready," he said simply. 50 ships that can outmaneuver anything they've got. Every captain has been training for this scenario for 5 years. They know the stakes." President Park looked around the table at these people who had become the guardians of human independence. She had been elected to lead Earth through peaceful times, but history had other plans. Now she had to make a decision that would either save humanity or doom it. "How certain are we that we can win?" she asked. General Lee spread his hands on the table. "Ma'am, there are no guarantees in war, but I'd rather die fighting than live on my knees, and based on what Dr. Choi has shown me, I think we have a real chance." Dr. Choi nodded. "The aliens have been using the same tactics for thousands of years because they've always worked. They rely on overwhelming force and intimidation, but they've never faced an enemy that could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. The element of surprise is completely ours," Admiral Yoon added. "They think they know everything about our capabilities. They're wrong." President Park stood up slowly. Outside this room, billions of people were going about their normal lives. They were working, studying, falling in love, raising children. They had no idea that their entire future hung in the balance of decisions being made in this underground bunker. "Then it's decided," she said. "Ambassador Kim, prepare our response." 3 days later, Kim Tae-ho walked back into the crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council. This time he wasn't nervous. This time he carried with him the full backing of Earth's military might and the hopes of every human being who had ever dreamed of freedom. The council members were lounging in their seats, clearly expecting to hear humanity's surrender. High Chancellor Morthak looked bored, as if this was just another routine matter to be handled before lunch. Teho straightened his shoulders and spoke with perfect diplomatic courtesy, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Earth thanks the Council for their generous offer, he said, and several Council members smiled at what they thought was the beginning of humanity's submission. However, we must respectfully decline. The chamber fell silent. Not the normal quiet of people listening, but the complete shocked silence of people who couldn't believe what they had just heard. In 3,000 years of galactic history, no species had ever refused tribute. Ever. High Chancellor Morthak's. Six eyes widened in what might have been surprise or rage. Around the chamber, hundreds of alien voices began to buzz with confusion and anger. Teho smiled politely and bowed, just as he had been trained to do. As he walked out of the chamber, he could hear the chaos erupting behind him. The war was about to begin. Admiral Zekthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the destroyer of worlds, watching Earth grow larger on his main screen. The small blue planet looked so peaceful from this distance, with its white clouds swirling over green and brown continents. It was hard to believe that this tiny world had dared to refuse the Galactic Council's demands. Behind his massive dreadnought, 200 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy moved in perfect formation. Each ship was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. The Fifth Pacification Fleet had never known defeat in 3,000 years of conquest. Primitive world, Zekthar muttered to his tactical officer, a nervous creature with 4 arms and skin that changed colors when he was stressed. Right now, his skin was cycling through worried shades of purple and green. This will be over within hours. The Admiral was already thinking about what he would do after the humans surrendered. The Council had promised him governorship of 3 star systems if he brought Earth to heel quickly. He imagined himself ruling from a palace built from human resources while the survivors worked in his factories. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving no response to our surrender demands. The humans appear to be ignoring us completely." Zekthar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Typical primitive behavior. They probably don't even understand what's happening. Continue toward their planet. We'll give them a demonstration they won't forget. The fleet moved deeper into the solar system, passing by the outer planets without incident. Jupiter's massive bulk drifted by on their starboard side, its colorful storms looking almost pretty in the starlight. Saturn's rings sparkled like jewelry as they flew past. Everything seemed normal as they approached the asteroid belt, that ring of rocky debris floating between Mars and Jupiter. Zekthar's sensors showed exactly what they expected. Thousands of lifeless chunks of rock and ice, left over from when the solar system first formed billions of years ago. Entering the asteroid field, his navigator reported. No signs of defensive positions or military installations. "Of course not," Zekthar replied. "These humans barely have chemical rockets. What could they possibly have hidden out there?" That was when space exploded around them. The first hint of trouble came when Lieutenant Morquez at the sensor station started shouting, "Sir, energy signatures appearing throughout the asteroid field, massive power spikes everywhere." Before Zekthar could respond, what he had assumed were ordinary asteroids suddenly blazed with light. Hidden railgun platforms that had been disguised as lifeless rocks revealed themselves, their weapons charging up with deadly energy. "Battle stations," Zekthar screamed, but it was already too late. The first volley of kinetic projectiles hit his fleet like invisible hammers. These weren't energy weapons that could be blocked by shields. They were solid chunks of metal, fired at speed so incredible that they became unstoppable forces of destruction. The alien shields, designed over thousands of years to stop plasma, beams and laser cannons, offered no protection at all against physical objects moving at significant fractions of light speed. The projectiles punched through their defensive barriers as if they didn't exist, then tore through the hulls of the mighty dreadnoughts like bullets through paper. Commander Yakmor, Zekthar's second in command, watched in horror as ships around them simply vanished. One moment the bringer of death was flying alongside them, its crew of 3,000 aliens confident in their superiority. The next moment, it was an expanding cloud of debris and atmosphere. "Impossible!" Yakmor screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "Our sensors detected nothing. How did they hide weapons platforms throughout the entire asteroid belt?" 20 light minutes away, Captain Han So-young smiled grimly from her command bunker, deep inside the asteroid series. The largest rock in the belt had been hollowed out over 15 years, turned into a fortress that looked like just another, lifeless chunk of stone from the outside. "Welcome to the solar system," she whispered, as she watched another wave of kinetic rounds find their targets. Han had been preparing for this day since she was a young lieutenant. While politicians talked about peaceful contact with aliens, military engineers like her had been asking different questions. What if the aliens weren't friendly? What if they demanded Earth's surrender? How could humanity defend itself against enemies with thousands of years of technological advantage? The answer had been brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to match alien technology directly, Earth's defenders had focused on what humans did best: creative thinking and using the environment to their advantage. Every significant asteroid in the belt had been carefully examined over the past 20 years. The biggest ones were turned into hidden military bases. Smaller rocks were hollowed out and filled with weapons. Even tiny pebbles were repositioned to create a maze that would force invading fleets into kill zones. The aliens had expected to find primitive chemical rockets. Instead, they found themselves flying through the most sophisticated defensive system ever created. "Target the command ship," Han ordered her weapons officer. "Let's see how their admiral handles a real fight." More kinetic rounds streaked through space, invisible death traveling faster than the alien sensors could track. The destroyer of worlds shuddered as projectiles punched through its armor, causing explosions throughout the massive vessel. "Shields are failing," Yakmor reported, his skin now flashing bright red with terror. "Hull breaches on 17 decks. We're losing atmosphere." Around them, the rest of the once mighty fleet was suffering the same fate. Ships that had terrorized entire star systems were being torn apart by weapons they couldn't see or understand. The careful formation that had looked so impressive just minutes before was now a scattered mess of damaged vessels, trying desperately to escape the kill zone. "Return fire," Zekthar ordered, but his plasma cannons couldn't target enemies they couldn't locate. The hidden weapons platforms were camouflaged so perfectly that they looked like ordinary asteroids even when they were shooting. "Sir, we've lost over half the fleet," his tactical officer reported, his forearms shaking as he tried to process the disaster unfolding around them. "Recommend immediate retreat." Zekthar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Red symbols showing destroyed ships covered the screen. In less than 10 minutes, the most powerful military force in galactic history had been reduced to scattered wreckage. "All ships, emergency withdrawal to Mars orbit," he finally commanded, his voice hoarse with shock. "Reform what's left of the fleet behind the red planet." As the surviving alien ships limped away from the asteroid belt, nursing their wounds and trying to comprehend what had just happened, Captain Han allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The first phase of Earth's defense had worked perfectly, but she knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was still to come, and Admiral Kang Do-hyun's fleet was waiting behind Mars, ready to show these ancient bullies what humans could really do when they decided to fight back. Admiral Zekthar's mighty fleet, reduced to barely a day, 100 damaged ships crawled toward Mars, completely unaware that the worst was yet to come. They thought they had survived the humans' opening move. They had no idea that the real battle hadn't even begun. Admiral Kang Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Incheon, watching the red planet Mars grow larger on his view screen. Behind the planet, hidden in its shadow like predators waiting to strike, 50 of Earth's finest warships prepared for the fight of their lives. Do-hyun had been preparing for this moment for 15 years. He remembered being a young officer when the first alien signals were detected. While politicians talked about peaceful contact and scientists dreamed of sharing knowledge, military leaders like him had asked a different question. What if they're not friendly? Now, watching the scattered remains of the alien fleet limping toward Mars after their devastating encounter with the asteroid belt, Do-hyun knew that all those years of preparation were about to be tested. "Sir, enemy fleet is at optimal range. reported Lieutenant Park Soo-young from her tactical station. Her voice was steady, but Do-hyun could see her hands trembling slightly on her controls. This was her first real battle, and she was about to face aliens who had conquered entire civilizations. "All ships, this is Admiral Kang," Do-hyun spoke into his quantum communicator. The device looked like a simple headset, but it represented humanity's greatest technological breakthrough. Unlike normal radio signals that took time to travel, quantum communication was instant. Every human ship in the fleet could talk to each other as if they were in the same room, no matter how far apart they were. Execute Pattern Phoenix. What happened next would have been impossible with any other military force in galactic history. All 50 human ships moved at exactly the same moment, turning and accelerating in perfect coordination. It looked like a dance, but it was actually the deadliest military maneuver ever created. The human ships were small compared to the alien dreadnoughts. Where the alien vessels were massive, slow-moving fortresses designed to intimidate enemies into surrender, the human ships were built for speed and agility. They darted through space like fighters' jets, impossible to predict or catch. But it wasn't just their speed that made them dangerous. Every human ship was connected to the same artificial intelligence network. They shared information instantly, coordinating their attacks with precision that no living pilot could match. When one ship spotted a weakness in an alien vessel's shields, every other ship knew about it immediately. Admiral Zekathar watched in horror from his flagship as the human ships emerged from behind Mars. These weren't the primitive rockets his intelligence reports had described. These ships moved like nothing he had ever seen, changing direction so quickly that his gunners couldn't keep up. "All ships focus fire on the lead vessel," he screamed into his communicator. His remaining 100 ships turned their massive plasma cannons toward the Incheon, unleashing enough energy to melt a small moon, but the energy beams hit empty space. Do-hyun's ship had already moved, and the other human vessels were attacking from 3 different directions at once. The human railguns were unlike anything the aliens had ever faced. Instead of energy weapons that could be blocked by shields, they fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The projectiles moved so fast that they were invisible, striking alien ships before the defenders even knew they were under attack. One by one, the massive alien dreadnoughts began to explode, their thick armor designed to protect against plasma. Weapons was useless against kinetic projectiles traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The human weapons punched through their hulls like bullets through paper. "Impossible," Zekathar shouted as his fleet dissolved around him. "How are they coordinating so precisely?" He got his answer when 3 human ships attacked his flagship, simultaneously from different angles. Their timing was perfect, their aim flawless. Within seconds, his command ship was drifting powerless in space. But the real surprise was happening thousands of light years away. Major Song Ji-hai had been waiting for this moment for 23 years. Her ship, the Busan, looked like a simple exploration vessel to anyone who scanned it. For 2 decades, it had drifted quietly near the Vorthen homeworld, disguised as a research station studying distant stars. In reality, it was one of humanity's most sophisticated weapons platforms. When the signal came through the quantum network, Ji-hai smiled grimly and began powering up systems that had been dormant for years. Around the galaxy, dozens of other exploration ships were doing the same thing. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They assumed that humanity's expansion into space had been peaceful exploration. They never suspected that every research, vessel and trade ship that humans had sent out over the past 50 years had actually been a carefully disguised weapons platform, positioned near important alien worlds. "This is Major Song to all Phantom units," she broadcast on the encrypted human network. "Operation Damocles is now active. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth." Across 17 star systems, human sleeper ships revealed their true nature. The Vorthan homeworld's orbital defense platforms exploded without warning. The Council's main supply depot near the Galactic Rim went up in a ball of fire. Military bases that had stood unconquered for centuries suddenly found themselves under attack by enemies they didn't know existed. The aliens had expected to fight one primitive species confined to a single solar system. Instead, They discovered that humanity had quietly positioned weapons throughout their territory over the course of decades. Back in the solar system, Admiral Zekthar's once mighty 5th Pacification Fleet was now nothing but debris floating. In space, of the 200 ships that had entered the system expecting an easy victory, fewer than 20 remained, and most of those were too damaged to fight. Admiral Kang Do-hyun looked at the tactical display showing the complete destruction of the alien fleet. His officers were cheering, but he remained focused. This was just the beginning. "Send a message to Earth Command," he ordered. "Phase 1 complete. The galaxy is about to learn that humans don't make good slaves." The 5th Pacification Fleet, which had never known defeat in 3,000 years of conquest, existed only in memory. And across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was about to discover that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The great crystalline chamber that had once been the symbol of galactic power now looked like a disaster zone. High Chancellor Morthak sat hunched on his throne, which seemed too big for him now. The massive alien who had once commanded fear from every species in the galaxy looked smaller somehow, as if defeat had physically shrunk him. Around the chamber, the few remaining council members sat in stunned silence. Many seats were empty now. Representatives had fled back to their homeworlds or simply disappeared when the news started pouring in. The holographic displays that usually showed the peaceful order of council space now flashed with emergency reports from across the galaxy. Vorthan. "Defense fleet destroyed at Kepler 442, one aide reported, his voice shaking. "Human forces have taken control of the orbital stations." "The mining colonies in the Centauri sector are in full revolt," another called out. "They've declared independence and are asking for human protection." "Our supply lines to the outer rim have been completely cut off," a third aide added. 17. Different species have stopped paying tribute and formed something they're calling the Liberation Coalition. Morthak's 6 eyes, once bright with the confidence of absolute power, now looked dull and unfocused. He had ruled the galaxy for over 2 centuries, and his species had led the Council for 3,000 years. The idea that everything could collapse so quickly seemed impossible. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked quietly. His military advisor, a nervous creature with too many arms, consulted his datapad. "Fewer than 300 operational vessels across all member fleets, Your Excellence. Many worlds are refusing to send reinforcements." 300 ships. A week ago, the Council had commanded over 10,000 vessels. The humans hadn't just won battles. They had somehow caused the entire structure of galactic civilization to crumble. The great doors of the chamber opened with a sound that echoed through the vast space. But instead of the usual parade of alien diplomats seeking favor, 3 humans walked in. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho looked exactly the same as he had during his first visit, still wearing his simple black diplomatic uniform. But everything else had changed. This time he wasn't alone, and he wasn't asking for anything. General Shin Yunji walked to his right, her military uniform decorated with medals that told the story of Earth's unlikely victory. She was a small woman by human standards, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had just accomplished the impossible. Admiral Lim Hyun-woo flanked Tae-ho's left side, still wearing his Space Fleet uniform. His calm expression gave no hint of the fact that he had just commanded the most successful military campaign in galactic history. The 3 humans walked slowly down the center aisle of the chamber, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Every alien eye followed them, but now the stares were filled with fear instead of contempt. Tae-ho stopped in front of Morthak's throne and looked up at the creature who had once demanded humanity's surrender. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the chamber. "The Terran Alliance offers terms," he announced, and several council members flinched at the word terms. A week ago, they had been the ones making demands. Now they were about to receive them. "All tribute demands are hereby abolished," Tae-ho continued, his tone as polite and professional as it had always been. "Every species currently under council rule will be offered the choice of independence or voluntary membership in a new galactic confederation based on equality and mutual respect." Around the chamber, alien voices began to buzz with shock and confusion. Some species had been paying tribute for so long that they had forgotten what freedom felt like. Oppressed species will be granted immediate independence and protection under the Terran Alliance, General Shin added, stepping forward. Any former council member who attempts to maintain control through force will face the full military response of the Allied fleet. The age of galactic tyranny ends today, Admiral Lim concluded. Morthak stared at the three humans for a long moment. His ancient mind struggled to process what was happening. The Galactic Council had existed for longer than most species had been spacefaring. The idea that three members of a species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel a few decades ago could destroy something so permanent seemed like a nightmare. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We ruled for millennia. We had the largest fleet in galactic history. We controlled resources from 1,000 worlds. How did you defeat us so completely?" General Shin stepped forward, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. The anger that humans had felt at being treated like primitive animals finally showed through. "You ruled through fear," she said, her voice carrying the weight of every human who had ever been told they weren't good enough. "You got so comfortable being bullies that you forgot something important. When you corner someone and they have nothing left to lose, they discover they had everything they needed to win." She gestured toward the empty seats around the chamber. "Your empire wasn't built on loyalty or respect. It was built on terror. The moment someone stood up to you, everyone else realized they could do the same thing." As if to prove her point, another aide rushed into the chamber with more reports. "Your Excellence, the Arcturian Republic has just declared independence. The Tau Ceti colonies are requesting human assistance. His voice trailed off as he realized he was delivering the Council's death warrant. Taiho looked around the chamber one last time. "The Terran Alliance will establish embassy offices on Earth for any species wishing to join our confederation. Membership is voluntary, and all members will have equal voices in our decisions." He paused and looked directly at Morthak. "The galaxy is changing, Your Excellence. The choice now is whether you want to be part of building something better, or whether you want to cling to the ruins of something that was never meant to last." As the three humans turned and walked out of the chamber, the sound of their footsteps seemed to echo through the entire galaxy. Behind them, the greatest empire in galactic history continued its collapse, not with a bang but with the whisper of species finally daring to dream of freedom. Within hours, news of the Council's defeat spread to every corner of known space. Species that had suffered under tribute demands for centuries began to celebrate in their streets. The age of the Galactic Council was over, and the age of the Terran Alliance had begun. Humanity had done more than refuse to kneel. They had shown the entire galaxy that even the most powerful tyrants could fall when people decided they were ready to stand up.